Every beginner dreams of a tank that cleans itself. You walk into the pet store, look at the bottom tanks, and think you're hiring a quiet little janitor to handle the mess so you don't have to. Small tanks don't fail faster. Small mistakes just don't dilute. Today, we are breaking down why you should never buy these 5 popular bottom dwellers and which 5 accessible alternatives you should get instead. The delayed trap. This doesn't fail immediately. That's why most people miss it. When you walk into a fish store, the employee points to the glass and hands you a tiny 2-inch fish with a cute face. They call it a cleanup crew. They tell you it eats waste, cleans algae, and minds its own business. It sounds like a bargain. You pay $5, drop it into your community tank, and check that chore off your mental list. Everything looks fine. The water tests 0. The fish are swimming. And that is the most dangerous stage. Because what you actually bought wasn't a worker. You bought a biological ticking time bomb. Let's start with number 5 on the worst list. The common Pleco. At the store, it's a 2-inch, harmless little button-eyed creature glued to the glass. It looks peaceful. It looks useful. But the common Pleco is an evolutionary logistics disaster for the average hobbyist. I once bought a tiny one thinking it would keep my driftwood spotless. Within 12 months, that cute little fish turned into a 12-inch, heavy-bodied organic waste factory. It doesn't just eat algae, it produces triple the bioload it consumes. It bulldozes your aquascape, knocks over your hardscape, and turns crystal clear water into a cloudy suspension of shredded wood and fish waste. By the time you realize your filter can't handle it, your tank parameters are drifting, and you're looking at a fish too big to rehome and too stubborn to die easily. Which brings us to number 4, the Chinese algae eater. Sellers love this fish because it's cheap and active. It seems like the ultimate weapon against green glass. But as the Chinese algae eater matures past its juvenile phase, a metabolic switch flips in its biology. It loses its appetite for algae and develops a taste for the high-protein slime coat of slower-moving fish like angelfish or tetras. It stops grazing and starts lurking, latching onto the flanks of your prized community fish like a tiny, aggressive vampire. You wake up to find your centerpiece fish swimming around with raw patches on their sides, stressed out and slowly fading, while your so-called cleaner hides behind the filter intake, acting innocent. Then there is number 3, the rainbow or red-tailed shark. They sell these because of the bright flash of red on the tail, labeling them as striking bottom occupants. But a shark in a freshwater community setup is a contradiction in terms. As they mature, they stop being bottom dwellers and start becoming territorial warlords. They stake out the lower third of the tank as their sovereign territory, chasing anything that touches the substrate. Corydoras get bullied away from food. Peaceful tetras live in perpetual panic, hovering near the top, and your tank goes from a relaxing display to a low-intensity civil war zone. Number 2 on the worst list is the clown loach. Everyone loves them. They look like little orange and black clowns, and they're famous for eating pest snails. But pet shops routinely sell them for 20-gallon and 30-gallon community tanks. Omitting one minor detail, they grow to over a foot long and require massive social groups. A single clown loach in a small tank doesn't thrive. It stunts, stresses, and turns frantic, pacing the glass because its environment is a cage that won't let it stretch its biology. And finally, number 1, common Corydoras kept on sharp, abrasive gravel. Corys are beloved, but putting them on abrasive, sharp-edged gravel is like forcing a dog to walk barefoot across broken glass. Their sensitive barbels, the little whiskers they use to sift and search for food, erode away from friction and bacterial infection. They lose their ability to forage, their underbellies get scratched, and they waste away in plain sight while owners wonder why their hardy bottom fish didn't make it. The invisible landfill trap. If nothing looked wrong with your setup, would you even think to change anything down there? This is where it quietly turns against you. That is the invisible landfill trap. The bottom of your tank isn't a magical recycling plant, it's where your shortcuts collect. If you want bottom dwellers that actually support your system instead of turning into an administrative nightmare, you have to look at species whose biology matches a standard home aquarium. Let's flip the board. Here are the 5 best, highly accessible bottom dwellers you should be getting instead. Starting with number 5, the Pygmy Corydoras. If you have a nano tank or a heavily planted setup where standard bottom dwellers feel too bulky, the Pygmy Cory is a masterclass in scale. Growing to just an inch in length, they break every rule of traditional bottom-dwelling fish. They don't just scuttle along the floor. They form tight little schools that hover in the mid-water column, acting like a standard schooling fish one moment and checking in on the substrate responsibilities the next. They fit where other bottom fish can't, they don't disrupt your layout, and they bring continuous motion to every inch of the water column. Number 4, the Panda Garra. If you've been burned by lazy algae eaters or aggressive Chinese algae eaters, the Panda Garra is the exact correction. They have a specialized mouth structure that allows them to grip rocks and glass in moderate currents while grazing methodically. Unlike a Roomba that sits motionless in a corner, the Panda Garra has real personality. They perch on wood, interact with each other in harmless, entertaining little squabbles, and display striking black and white patterns that demand attention. They turn algae control into something you actually want to watch during your morning coffee. Number 3, Kuhli loaches in groups of 6 or more. At first glance, they look like colorful little aquatic noodles with an identity crisis. People walk past them at the store, assuming they're just going to hide and vanish. But keep a tight group of 6 in a planted tank with sand, and the bottom layer transforms. They don't bulldoze your hardscape, they weave through it like liquid silk. They slide under driftwood, explore every corner, and create an active, writhing community texture that brings the floor of the tank alive. They don't fight, they don't eat your other fish, and they turn the substrate into an active, breathing habitat. Number 2, Panda or bronze Corydoras kept on fine sand. If you want the classic Cory experience without the barbel trauma, the secret isn't the fish, it's the substrate. Put bronze or Panda Corydoras on smooth, fine aquarium sand and watch what happens. Instead of scraping their faces on jagged rocks, they plunge their noses deep into the sand, filtering it out through their gills in a rhythmic, organic foraging dance. They are peaceful, highly social, and act as the true emotional barometer of your tank. When your cories are active and sifting, your bottom layer is healthy. And finally, number 1, the Bristlenose Pleco. If the common Pleco is a 12-inch logistical disaster, the Bristlenose is the sensible professional. Maxing out at a manageable 4 to 5 inches, it fits comfortably in standard tanks without outgrowing your setup. The males grow a magnificent quirky crown of facial bristles that look like a miniature biology experiment, and they actually consume algae and biofilm off your hardscape with real dedication. Give a Bristlenose a piece of driftwood to graze on, some sinking wafers, and decent hiding spaces, and you get years of dependable, visible behavior without waking up to a tank crash. If your tank bottom has been turning into a quiet graveyard for impulse buys, it wasn't because you aren't trying hard enough. If it didn't fail immediately, it wasn't your fault. You were simply sold a job title instead of an animal. If this kind of tank logic helps you avoid expensive mistakes, hit subscribe. And if your problem is the exact opposite, if your water parameters or filtration above the bottom layer are failing, watch our Total Dissolved Solids guide next. Until next time, keep your systems balanced, your glass spotless, and your curiosity flowing.